The Worker Protection Standard, or WPS, is a regulation issued by the Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA, that your employer must follow to help you be safe while you're working here. You should follow your employer's instructions. This video will tell you what to expect from your employer, and we will talk about easy steps that you should take to keep you protected from pesticides, where they may have been used and where their residues may be present. And that's why you're watching this program. There is little need for you to be concerned about your health and safety while you're here, as long as you follow the safety steps we'll be discussing. If you have any questions, make sure to ask your supervisor or the trainer who is here today. They're here to help you do your best work and to keep you out of harm's way. Here at the greenhouse, most of you will be considered either workers or handlers. Workers are employees who do hand tasks in crop areas, such as cultivating, pruning, and harvesting. Most often, workers will be exposed to pesticide residues from contact with soil or plants. Exposure can also occur due to drift from nearby applications, or even from water with pesticides in it that's used to irrigate crops. Workers and handlers might also be exposed to pesticide residues that can be found on benches, trays, and other machinery, including fumigation equipment. These residues might not be visible, so just because you can't see them does not mean that they are not there. Handlers are employees who are responsible for mixing and loading pesticides, applying pesticides to crops, or cleaning and repairing pesticide application equipment. Handlers are more likely to be exposed to pesticides directly as they mix and apply the products, and must use extra caution in their tasks to limit that exposure. Employers are not permitted to use workers to mix, load, or apply pesticides, or even assist in applications unless they are trained as handlers. A couple more definitions you'll need to understand are pesticides and exposure. Pesticides are chemical materials, either synthetic or organic, used to control or eliminate various pests. Pests can be insects, weeds, mold, fungus, or rodents, anything that can damage our plants or crops. Pesticides, when used correctly, are effective tools in the battle to grow and produce quality crops. Because exposure to pesticides can make you sick, you should understand how they can enter your body and how you can reduce your exposure to them. It's important to follow the safety steps we will talk about today when it comes to the possibility of pesticide exposure. So, how can we be exposed to a pesticide? How does it enter our body to make us sick? Exposure can happen from contacting a plant that has been treated. Most often, it occurs through contact with your skin or from touching your eye. You can be exposed by breathing in particles of dust or from drift. On rare occasions, people have consumed pesticides by eating or drinking them. Most exposures can be prevented by washing your hands thoroughly whenever possible, especially when you have been working with plants that have been treated. You should use the water, soap, and towels that your employer has to provide near your work area to wash when you leave the treated area. This is most important before you eat, drink, smoke, or put anything in or near your mouth or eyes. It's important, too, to wash your hands before you go to the bathroom. Pesticides from your hands can get on your sensitive skin and can be easily absorbed. Something else to be alert for are your employer's instructions for areas to stay away from. When pesticide applications are taking place, your employer must not direct you to enter the area being treated or to be near the application equipment. The only persons allowed in an area during an application are appropriately trained and equipped handlers involved in the application. For applications that have already taken place, your employer is required to notify you of those applications by posting signs, like this one, or by telling you about the application. When you see this sign, do not go into this area until it comes down. It is not safe. The sign should look like this. It has a grim man with his hand up on a red background and a black circle around it. There might be a time when you are working in the crop area when a pesticide application is going on nearby. Even if you are outside the area being treated, pesticide drift might move over the area that you are working in, and you need to leave that area immediately so the pesticide cannot contact you. Even if you know that they are low toxicity pesticides, you do not want to allow contamination. Over time, even low toxicity pesticides can harm you. Sometimes you can develop sensitivity to pesticides even with low-level exposures. Each pesticide carries potential hazards from exposure for workers, handlers, and their families, especially to children and pregnant women. These hazards can include acute effects, or effects that happen quickly during or after exposure. Some examples are dizziness and rashes. Delayed effects, symptoms that may take some time to develop long after an exposure. Chronic effects, effects that happen as a result of small exposures over a long time period, perhaps as long as 10 or 20 years, including cancers and birth defects. And sensitization effects. These are symptoms, often a rash or breathing problems, that show up once your body has reached a certain level of exposure. This central location is where you can find information about how to do your work safely around pesticides. It must be at a location that you can access during regular hours. The pesticide application records will include the EPA registration number, active ingredients, the location and description of the application area, the day and time of its application, and the length of the REI, or restricted entry interval. This REI is the amount of time that must pass before it is safe to re-enter an area after it's been treated with pesticides. In addition to pesticide application records, you should also have access to the safety data sheets, or the SDS, at the central location. The SDS have information about the hazards of pesticides used where you work. You'll also find pesticide safety information probably on a poster similar to this. Besides the reminders about ways to reduce your exposure, there will be contact numbers and addresses for an area hospital or medical center, along with the contact information for the state lead agency, which in Pennsylvania will be your regional Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture. You can use the phone number for the state lead agency to report pesticide or WPS violations. Your employer must inform you where to find this information at the central location. You should make sure you learn its location right away. We talked earlier about washing your hands and the important role it plays in protecting you from pesticides. Do not use irrigation water to wash with, as it might have pesticides in it, and definitely don't drink irrigation water. When you are done with work at the end of the day, wash thoroughly before going home. This is especially important for handlers. If possible, handlers should shower and change into clean clothing before going home. There are additional ways that you can keep your family safe from being exposed to hazardous pesticides. Never take used pesticide containers home from work. No matter how well you feel they've been rinsed or how clean they appear, these containers are not safe to be used for any purpose. Even the smallest amounts of pesticide can make you or your family members very sick if you were to drink from one of these jugs. Personal protective equipment, or PPE, is another way to protect yourself from pesticides. If you handle pesticides, it is necessary for you to wear PPE as described on the product label. PPE may include coveralls, special gloves, chemical-resistant boots, eye protection, and even dust or respirator masks to protect handlers when they are handling pesticides. Do not take PPE home with you. Your employer must provide, maintain, and clean PPE. Dispose of damaged or heavily contaminated PPE. Like the pesticide containers, PPE may carry residues and should never be used in a home situation. If exposed, these residues can be particularly harmful to children because of their smaller body mass, as well as to pregnant women. Clothes that have pesticide residues on them can transfer those residues to your skin. Work clothes that you wear to protect yourself from skin exposure should include long pants, long sleeves, and shoes with socks. Occasionally, and in spite of everyone's best efforts, accidental exposures to pesticides can still occur. If you believe you have been exposed but you don't have any symptoms, wash off as soon as possible. If your clothing has been exposed, take it off immediately and wash yourself thoroughly. Again, shower if possible. Be careful when removing your clothes to prevent getting pesticides in your eyes, face, or mouth. Make sure you wash thoroughly as soon as you can, wash your hair too, and put on clean clothes. If you get pesticides in your eyes, be sure to rinse them with clean water as quickly as possible to minimize possible long-term damage. If only one eye has been exposed, make sure to rinse that eye without contaminating the other eye. Rinse the affected eye for at least 15 minutes and then seek immediate medical care. If you have been exposed to a pesticide, you may have a headache or feel nauseated, feel dizzy, lightheaded, have a rash, or sweat more than usual. If you start to feel ill, the first thing you should do is notify your supervisor to ask for emergency assistance. Your employer must provide transportation for you to a medical facility and will be required to provide the EPA information about pesticides you may have been exposed to. Your employer must provide the SDS and the application and exposure information to the treating medical personnel. The SDS sheet at the central location will give first aid instructions. If you think you may be experiencing heat stress, try taking a few minutes in a safe, cool, or shaded area and get something cold to drink, preferably water. Loosen your clothing and/or your PPE and get as much fresh air as possible. Try to have someone stay with you until you feel better. It's possible that you could find a coworker who's not feeling well or may even be unconscious because of a pesticide exposure. That person should be taken to a medical facility as soon as possible. Again, your best response is to get help from your employer immediately and to get the injured person to medical care. Be careful not to contaminate yourself. It is important that a person with proper training take care of the sick person. We can't emphasize enough that being alert and paying attention to assignments and the provided pesticide application information is the smartest way to stay safe and healthy on the job. Well, that's about it for now. Let's take a quick look at the basic points we cover today. The WPS, or Worker Protection Standard, is a regulation developed by the Environmental Protection Agency that helps to keep you safe and healthy at work by requiring your employer to provide information and supplies related to minimizing your exposure to pesticides. You will be trained every year to be taught or reminded about the safety elements provided, as well as your responsibility to understand and apply the information you've been taught. Your employer will provide a central location at work where you can read and learn all about the pesticides in use, where and when they've been applied, information about their active ingredients, as well as contact and address information for the closest medical center or hospital in case of an exposure. In addition to the safety data sheets, pesticide labels can provide information related to their safe handling, as well as signal words and basic first aid information. Protect yourself and your family by paying attention to signs and areas of potential exposure. Keep children and non-working family away from pesticide-treated areas. Don't use pesticide containers for anything other than storing pesticides properly. Keep your work clothes separate from regular family laundry. Wash thoroughly at the end of the day or shower and change into clean clothes either at a wash station or at home before coming into contact with your spouse or other family members. If you think you've been exposed to pesticides or see someone else who has, get help from your supervisor immediately. They will be able to determine the best way to treat the situation. Don't try to help someone who may be unconscious. Let those who are trained and wearing the proper PPE handle the situation. Most employers are fair and concerned for your safety, but just in case, your employer cannot retaliate against you for wanting to follow the WPS or for reporting pesticide violations. Once more, there's little reason to be afraid at work, but there is a great value in being alert and understanding how your own actions can keep you safe and healthy at work today and every day. Thanks for watching.